Alright, with us are Lenovo's brand new, fully redesigned locks for 2026, with the Intel Panther Lake version and the AMD one. Now, these have been the best budget gaming laptops for a really long time, so we just wanted to do them justice and really test them thoroughly, which I believe we've done here. But as you know, on this channel, we value your time, so I'm just going to get to the point and tell you our findings right now. These locks are a fantastic update. They are smaller, they are significantly lighter, they're more compact, they feel more premium than last year's with things like a better trackpad, they have much better battery life, and they don't get warm to the touch during gaming. What's more, Lenovo has fixed the noticeable ghosting issue of the prior panel. That being said, these aren't perfect. You do feel a little fan vibration through the keyboard deck at times, and the AMD model has poorer CPU performance and may perform a little worse in games. Realistically though, if these come in at the price point of the Prime model, it's going to be really hard for other budget laptops to compete. Now on that note, before you buy, you'll want to check our website bestlaptop.deals. You see, over there we track prices right across retailers so you know which are truly good deals. Links will also be down below if you just want to hop in and buy one of these. And with that said, here's our review. I'm going to start with CPU performance and then we're going to get into gaming. This new lock will have 3 CPUs available. 2 are current-gen Panther Lake chips, a 356H which has 16 cores and powers one of the 2 configs I have here today. Then there's also the 355 8-core Panther Lake chip, and finally an 8-core Ryzen 7 250. The 200 series from AMD, essentially a rebranded Zen 4 chip from over 2 years ago. Now even back then, it was very similar to a Ryzen 7 U chip. The U meaning AMD's less powerful chips found in, thinner light ultrabooks. I hate renaming older chips. I'm concerned it just makes people feel like they're getting something new when they aren't. Anyway, if you do want a current AMD Zen 5 chip, you'll need to buy a laptop with one of AMD's 300 or 400 series chips. In Geekbench, which tests a variety of common performance tasks, the lock with Panther Lake just destroys the lock with the older Zen 4 chip. As you can see, we've stacked up these new locks versus some competitors around the $1,000 price point. As a budget gaming laptop, normally the locks would compete with other budget gaming laptops like Gigabyte's Gaming A16, which we have shown you here, or HP's Victus. But we expect the 16-core Panther Lake chip to, unfortunately, raise the price, probably pretty substantially. So it wouldn't surprise us if it now competes with gaming laptops from the tier above, like HP's Omen 16 or Lenovo's own Legion 5. As you can see, there is a huge range of CPUs available in this price bracket. The Legion 5i, which is the next step up in Lenovo's range, is at the top with its Arrow Lake HX processor. Our lock with the Panther Lake H chip, it lands around the middle in this performance test, and unsurprisingly, our lock with AMD's Ryzen 7 250 is dead last. Moving over to Cinebench is a similar story. The Panther Lake 356H chip is above average, and that AMD 200 chip, it continues to get utterly destroyed. Just to give you some context, the Dell XPS 14, which is a tiny laptop by comparison and has some great battery life, it scores 3,700 in this test. Anyway, you can clearly see if it's pure CPU performance you want, there are better options available at this price point. During a 10-minute Cinebench torture test, the Panther Lake chip shows its power efficiency by tying as our second lowest power draw, averaging 60 watts. But as I showed you, it actually performs above average here. Less watts for more performance, I'll take it. Now, one of the benefits of the disappointing performance of the AMD lock is how little power it pulls, less than 50 watts on average, which is really low for a gaming laptop. During this stress test, the lock does extremely well in terms of the heat you feel. Both laptops are well under 40 degrees on the keyboard deck, very comfortable to use. The Panther Lake lock in particular is really very cool to the touch. Part of this is probably because it's running its fans faster, but its fan noise is pretty standard for a gaming laptop. The lock with the Ryzen 7 250 is quieter. As mentioned earlier, you can feel some vibrations from the fans through the laptop's keyboard deck and palm rest. Not the worst we've experienced, but it's definitely there. In core temperatures, the lock with Panther Lake does hit a toasty 96 Celsius, but then it settles at a comfortable 76. The AMD version though, it runs its CPU super cool, maxing out at only 70 degrees Celsius and settling down at 60. This is not surprising, as I said, it's essentially a U-series Zen 4 processor that's normally found in thinner light laptops, not big gaming ones, with beefy cooling solutions. Anyway, we drilled in and tested each of the stock performance modes. The Panther Lake version can really just be run on balance mode. The fan noise gets noticeably quieter for no loss in performance and a minimal bump up in heat. The AMD model also doesn't see a benefit of running on its performance mode over balance, but you should be careful of running it on its quiet mode. There is a big hit to performance. Now, keep in mind, thus far we've been talking about CPU-only tasks, so let's get into gaming. Starting with the synthetic benchmark, Time Spy. Here we see the Panther Lake version do very well, close to the top for an RTX 5060 gaming laptop. The AMD LOQ comes in dead last, at least of the ones that feed their GPUs the max of 115 watts. As you can see, it's really CPU performance that's holding back the AMD LOQ here. That being said, it's around middle of the pack at this price point, and it does beat out the LOQ from last year with a 5050. You'd kind of hope it did. In Port Royal, which tests ray tracing, these two configurations of the LOQ are at the top of the leaderboard and are neck and neck. No surprises, as Port Royal is really a GPU-only benchmark, so that difference in CPU, it just doesn't matter here. Let's take a look at some actual games, all tested at the display's native 2560 by 1600 resolution. In Cyberpunk, with frame gen off and upscaling set to balanced, we did see decent results, above 60 for average FPS and a little below for 1% lows. By the way, we've actually added even more RTX 5060 laptops to compare these two. The LOQ is right up there with the best of them. That's with one exception. The 1% lows of the AMD version are a little behind. We did a lot of extra testing here, which I am going to talk about in a moment, but we believe this is due to the slower CPU. With frame gen on, we see a disappointing result from most of Lenovo's gaming laptops. Their average FPS indeed does go up, but their 1% lows do not. The only exception being the Legion 7A. Given that 1% lows are really impactful for a smooth gaming experience, we don't feel it's worth turning on frame gen, especially when you consider the added latency. Looking at Marvel Rivals, which is a more demanding title, the Panther Lake LOQ now does much better than the AMD version. We initially thought this was due once again to the slower AMD processor. But in this case, it's actually due to memory. Our AMD LOQ has one stick of 16 gigs. Our Intel came with two sticks of 16 gigs. Ceph's initial theory was that 16 gigs just wasn't enough memory for this game. Windows was indeed reporting very high memory usage. To rule this out, we tried a single stick of 48, but it still had the issue. When we switched to two sticks of 8 gigs, it solved the problem and the AMD version performed just as well as the Panther Lake one. By the way, hopefully this is just an issue with our review unit. You see guys, these new LOQs, they should always come with two sticks. Apparently they'll either be coming with two sticks of 12 gig or two sticks of 16. Alright, onto Forza, which we've found does a really good job of testing both the CPU and GPU at the same time. What we immediately noticed is that both these LOQs, they don't feed their GPUs enough power. It happens on the performance mode and the custom extreme mode, even when we've specifically set these GPUs to max power. You can see this in the benchmarks. Both these LOQs perform worse than the Omen 16 and Lenovo's own Legion 5i. They're feeding their GPUs an average of 10 watts less. By the way, we don't normally see laptops hitting the max 115 watts in actual gameplay, but these should be feeding their GPUs more. We did try Firma just to double check that they could indeed hit that 115 watt limit, and they could. We also didn't see this issue in the other games we tested. Guys, we were pulling our hair out and we just randomly retested these laptops on hybrid mode. This is where the display is driven by the integrated GPU and the DGPU just feeds its output through that. Good for conserving battery, as the laptop can just disable the DGPU when it isn't needed. But performance is normally a tiny bit worse. Well, in this case, both LOQs actually fed more power to the dedicated GPU in hybrid mode, and they performed as we expected in Forza. Guys, your guess is as good as mine here. Moral of the story, these LOQs can perform really well, so long as they have two sticks of memory. The AMD model though, it may hold you back slightly in some games, and I definitely recommend trying both DGPU and hybrid mode in your games of choice, just to see which performs better. Now, if Lenovo does address this, I will post a comment down below. Alright, I mentioned how the LOQs perform in their different modes. Obviously, we tried each of them. On the Panther Lake one, there doesn't seem to be a difference between the extreme custom performance mode and the stock performance mode. Dropping down to balance though, you do lose some performance, but you get a big sagging and fan noise. For the AMD one, there is a more noticeable drop in performance between the modes, likely due to the big drop in power fed to the CPU, but fan noise does improve. The last performance area that you may be curious about is how well these laptops do in creator tasks. I'm going to start with Puget's benchmark for Premiere Pro. The 16-core Panther Lake model performs really well. The AMD version, on the other hand, performs significantly worse. Basically turns your RTX 5060 laptop into a 5050. Now, this test was done before we knew about that memory issue with a single stick of RAM in the AMD model. We did try to test it with 2 sticks, but Puget just crashed out and wouldn't run. In DaVinci Resolve Studio, we see a similar picture. The Panther Lake H model keeps up with more powerful HX processors, and the AMD model once again downgrades your laptop from having a 5060 to essentially having a 5050. Now, let's talk battery life. Both these two locks, they did really well in our new battery drain test. We've now upped the brightness to 300 nits and we've switched from video playback to office tasks. In fact, these two locks have the longest battery life of any gaming laptop we've tested, at least in this budget value tier, which is really incredible given their somewhat small 60 watt-hour battery. Big props to Lenovo here, bravo! Surprising no one, the Panther Lake lock gets you about 30 minutes more than the AMD Zen 4 one. One thing I do want to point out is that the max performance you can achieve on battery is noticeably lower than what you can get when plugged in. More apparent on the Panther Lake lock, but in its favour, it still beats the AMD one when they are unplugged. Now that we're done with performance, and that was a lot, let's talk about the laptop itself, as a lot has improved. The lock has always been a heavy laptop. This new one is now over half a pound lighter. It's not quite as light as the 15.1-inch Legion 5i or Gigabyte Aero X16, but 4.5 pounds, still decent for a gaming laptop with a screen this size. On that screen, it is slightly smaller this year at 15.3 inches, down from 15.6. With that smaller screen, the locks are noticeably more compact than last year's model, which is good. The laptop feels pretty sturdy with only a little keyboard deck flex and a little flex on the lid. The plain grey lock is almost completely resistant to fingerprints. The screen can be opened with one hand, which reveals one of 2 new display options. As I mentioned, the screen has changed from 15.6 inches down to 15.3, and the aspect ratio is now 16:10 rather than the older 16:9. This means the 2 IPS panels are either 1920 by 1200 or 2560 by 1600, the latter of which is what we have in both of our laptops. The higher resolution screen, it is listed as being 100 nits brighter, and we measured it at over 450, so we expect the lower resolution one to reach at least 300. Both panels offer a matte finish to the display, which does minimize reflections. Color accuracy is very good for a budget laptop, covering 100% of sRGB, but it only covers around 80% of P3, which is not as much as some professional creators prefer. It's also not an OLED, so it doesn't look as vivid and have the inky blacks of something like the Legion 5i screen. As far as other factors of the displays go, we didn't detect any ghosting or backlight bleed, which is really good to see. You see, ghosting, it was an issue on prior locks. Lenovo states that both these new panels have a 3 millisecond response time. The displays both support G-Sync, and the laptop itself supports Advanced Optimus. This means you can switch between which GPU drives the display without restarting. There are 2 possible keyboards you can get. The only difference between them is whether it is single zone RGB or 24. We have the 24 zone one. It's hard to see the lighting in a well-lit room, but it is visible in the dark. The issue here is that there's a lot of light bleeding around the keys. The keyboard just doesn't have that premium look of Razer Blade's RGB keyboard. As far as the more important aspects of the keyboard go, it feels very nice to type on. Everyone here is usually a fan of Lenovo's keyboards. This one has an ample 1.6mm of key travel and doesn't feel overly clicky, but still clicky enough to feel satisfying. It has full-sized arrow keys which will minimize mispresses, and it also includes a number pad, which I personally don't like as it shifts the keyboard to the left, but I know there are plenty of people who will be happy about this. The trackpad is much improved this year. It's still mechanical and it's not the best one we've seen, but last year's lock had a really cheap feeling crappy trackpad. That one was just loud and the click was uneven, noticeably deeper on the bottom corners than the middle. Well, this new trackpad has neither of those issues, and it just feels more cohesive and more premium, so a nice step forward for these new locks. For connectivity, the lock comes with Wi-Fi 6 and Bluetooth 5.3, which I am a little disappointed by. However, in good news, it is upgradable, as is its memory and storage. You get 2 storage slots available. One was populated with the included SSD, and by the way, all the included SSDs are PCIe 4.0. For ports, we have a good selection, spread out on the left, the right, and also the back of the chassis. The left has a 5GB USB-A port and a 40GB USB-C port, which we did test to support 100-watt charging. It also connects directly to the dedicated GPU, which is not always a given. The back has a 10GB USB-A port, a 1GB Ethernet port, and the proprietary charging port, which does accept its 245-watt charger, which was the charger that came with both of these laptops. Now, on the specs, it does say there's also a 170-watt charger. I am worried if that will feed it enough power. It's going to be right on the edge for these locks. Even the 5050, it now boosts up to 115 watts. Previously, it was 100. That being said, ours did come with the correct charger, so just be aware of that when looking at the configuration you're getting. Anyway, rounding out the back, there's also an HDMI 2.1 port. It's nice that you can just keep those cables that you leave plugged in all the time out of the way. On the right side, we have one more 5GB USB-A port and a physical shutter for the webcam. The speakers are an area where Lenovo has clearly made some decisions to keep this laptop's costs low. The trebles and mids, they're clear and they sound pretty good, but there is absolutely no bass. It's like it's been completely deleted from the track. And the speakers are certainly not the loudest out there for a laptop in 2026. Take a listen. Here's how the webcam looks and sounds on the 2026 LOQ. It does appear to be an area where Lenovo have tried to save some money to make it a budget gaming laptop. And that was what I look like with good studio lights. Here's what I look like with dimmer normal room lights. For Linux, we did a quick test of Fedora 43. On the Intel LOQ, everything worked except Bluetooth. I'm talking about the webcam, the display's brightness controls, the speakers, the trackpad, Wi-Fi. We didn't test any specific tasks though that engaged the dedicated GPU. For the AMD one, we saw the load screen, but then the screen just went black, so we couldn't test anything else. Look, I want to say this. We hear the Linux community. You guys, you want more Linux testing. You want different distros, you want full installs with kernel updates. We get it. To make it viable, we have launched a new YouTube and Patreon membership tier. That way, you can directly support our Linux testing. The links are down below. The more we raise, the deeper we can go. Lastly, both LOQs, they did come with a Lenovo branded wireless mouse. It supports Bluetooth and also wireless via a USB receiver. It is battery powered and it charges via USB-C. Overall, for a free mouse, it feels pretty decent. Alright, let's wrap. Overall, as I said, we really like these new LOQs. Lenovo has fixed some of the biggest downsides of the prior model. The only real issue here is that slight fan vibration that you feel through the keyboard deck. Looking across the competitive landscape, I think the 16-core Panther Lake version is a fair price at $1,200 and an awesome price if you can find it for $1,000 or below. Above that, I'd say the Legion 5i is a better buy. It's a more premium laptop that comes with an OLED display. At that higher price point though, you could also consider HP's Omen 16 and Slim 16, both of which have larger 16-inch panels, which is a little more immersive for gaming. I'll link our review of those laptops down below, as well as our review of the Legion 5i. When it comes to the AMD version of the LOQ, I'd really like to see you saving at least $200 to $300 off from the Panther Lake one. Also, I wouldn't completely rule out the configurations of the LOQ with the 1920 display. Sure, small text, it won't look as crisp, but for a gaming laptop, you will be able to drive more frames. If you want to see our complete list of laptops that we recommend for different buyers, you'll absolutely find that over at our website, bestlaptop.deals. Over there, you can combine use cases together. You can even set custom price drop notifications to catch big deals. If you like our detailed reviews, you know the answer. Get subscribed with the notification bell on because more are coming. Till next time, go do something awesome with your day and I will catch you later.